One of the most difficult things that a person can do, maybe the most difficult thing, is to look squarely at reality when it's not what you wanted. When something collapses in your life, especially something as fundamental as a relationship, there's a deep temptation to cling to the fragments of what it used to be. You replay the good memories. You romanticize the moments when you felt seen and valued. You imagine, if only you tried harder, or if only you said the right thing, that somehow the old pattern would come back. And there's a certain cruelty in that because it traps you. It keeps you in a kind of half-life where you're no longer with the person, but you're not free of them either. That's why the first step toward emotional detachment is not some soft idea of letting go. It's the brutal confrontation with reality. And I say brutal because that's exactly what it feels like. You have to face the fact that she no longer chooses you, no longer invests in you, no longer stands with you as she once did. That truth is sharp, and it cuts right into your sense of identity, because relationships aren't just external. They're woven into the very structure of who you think you are. When someone pulls away, you don't just lose them. You lose a version of yourself that existed only in relation to them. But here's the alternative to confronting reality: illusion. Illusion whispers to you, maybe she'll come back if you just wait. Maybe she still loves you deep down. Maybe if you sacrifice more, prove yourself, hold on just a little longer, everything will return to how it was. And you can waste years of your life on that whisper. Years. I've seen people do it. They're 30, 40, 50 years old, still chained to the ghost of someone who walked away decades earlier. They never moved on because they refused to acknowledge the hard fact that the other person had already left them long before the body was gone. Now, it's easy to say, just face the truth. But why is it so hard? Because there's a kind of safety in illusion. Reality hurts, but illusion comforts you with hope, even if it's false. And hope, when misplaced, is not your friend, it's your jailer. What you're doing, when you cling to illusion, is sacrificing the possibility of a new life for the false comfort of a dead past. And that's a terrible bargain. So, what does it mean to confront reality in this context? It means you stop negotiating with the fantasy. You stop rewriting the past. You stop imagining that tomorrow she'll wake up and realize what she's lost. You take her actions at face value, not her words, not your projections, not your desperate interpretations. If she's gone, she's gone. And the sooner you can absorb that into the marrow of your bones, the sooner you can begin to live again. There's a psychological principle at work here. Human beings are narrative creatures. We don't just experience life, we tell ourselves stories about what life means. And when a relationship ends, the story is violently interrupted. It feels unfinished, jagged, wrong. You want to go back and fix the ending so that it resolves neatly, like a film or a novel. But life doesn't care about narrative neatness. It tears things apart suddenly, and you're left with raw, unprocessed fragments. And so you have a choice: keep pretending the story isn't over, or accept that it ended in the middle of a sentence. Now, this acceptance doesn't mean cynicism. It doesn't mean you dismiss all relationships as doomed or close yourself off from intimacy forever. That's not the point. The point is to be honest. Radical honesty with yourself about what is happening, rather than what you wish were happening. Because only when you do that can you step out of the shadows of the old story and into the light of something new. And here's something else. The confrontation with reality is not just about her. It's about you. Because if you can't face the fact that she no longer wants to be with you, then what you're really avoiding is the deeper realization that life is suffering, that people change, that love is fragile, that nothing is guaranteed. That's a terrifying awareness. But it's also liberating. Because if you can carry that burden without collapsing, you become stronger. You stop demanding that life be easier than it is. You start orienting yourself around truth rather than comfort. And that shift, that willingness to look at things as they are, is the foundation of genuine strength. So, yes, it's hard. It may be the hardest thing you ever do, to stop pretending, to stop clinging, to stop bargaining with the dead. But what's the alternative? To stay chained in the prison of your illusions, rotting away in the hope that someone who has already let you go will come back and rescue you? That's not life. That's self-betrayal. And so I'll leave you with this. Confront the truth, however cruel it feels. Face it directly. Because the pain of reality, while sharp, eventually heals and transforms you. But the comfort of illusion, it will never let you go, and it will never set you free. When people talk about moving on, they often assume it means shutting down your emotions, turning the page as if nothing happened, or distracting yourself so thoroughly that you don't have to feel the ache anymore. That's what a lot of men do when they're left by a woman they love. They bury the grief under work, alcohol, new relationships, or even anger. And it works, temporarily. But there's a cost to avoidance, and that cost is your soul's integrity. Because what you refuse to feel doesn't disappear. It festers. It leaks into the cracks of your life, sabotaging your friendships, your focus, your future. Detachment, real detachment, doesn't mean shutting down. It means moving through the grief rather than away from it. You cannot cut ties cleanly with someone who mattered to you without walking through the valley of loss. And it is a valley. You descend into it, and it feels endless, and you wonder if you'll ever climb out. But the descent is necessary. You have to allow yourself to feel the sadness, the anger, the betrayal, the emptiness. You have to name them, confront them, sit with them long enough that they no longer terrify you. Because grief is the process by which your mind and body reorganize themselves around the new reality. Without grief, you stay in denial. With grief, you begin to heal. Think of it like this. When a bone breaks, the body doesn't simply pretend the fracture isn't there. It rushes resources to the site. It inflames, it swells, it hurts like hell. But that's the body's way of setting the conditions for repair. Emotional grief functions the same way. The pain is not the enemy. It's the evidence that your psyche is working to mend itself. The problem is when you interrupt that process by numbing it. Every time you drown the grief with distractions, you interrupt the healing. You prolong the suffering. There's also a philosophical depth to grief that people rarely appreciate. To grieve is to acknowledge the value of what was lost. You only mourn what mattered. And in mourning, you're forced to face the fragility of everything you love. That's part of why it hurts so much. It isn't just her absence, it's the realization that all things can be taken away. That nothing, no matter how beautiful or intimate, is immune to the ravages of time and change. And that recognition, as dark as it feels, is actually a profound teacher. If you let it, grief awakens you to the seriousness of life. It strips away your illusions about permanence and forces you to confront mortality, vulnerability, impermanence. Most people run from that confrontation. But you don't have to. If you accept grief, you also accept the wisdom it carries, that what you lost was precious, and that to live fully is to risk loss again. That's not weakness, that's courage. To love at all is to open yourself to inevitable grief. And so, paradoxically, by grieving honestly now, you prepare yourself for deeper love later because you're no longer naive about its cost. This doesn't mean you wallow endlessly. Grief is not meant to become your identity. It's a passage, not a permanent home. But if you short-circuit it, if you repress it or escape it, you will find yourself haunted by it years down the line. A memory, a song, a familiar smell will collapse you, and you'll realize you never truly faced what happened. And at that point, you've lost not only the relationship, but also the years you spent running from its ghost. So, allow yourself to break. Allow the tears, the rage, the emptiness. Write it down. Speak it out loud. Talk to people you trust. Let your body carry the weight of the loss so that, eventually, it can set it down. There's no shortcut here, no clever trick to bypass it. You have to walk through the fire. But the fire burns away the illusions, the clinging, the dependency. What's left, if you stay with it long enough, is something stronger. Clarity, resilience, depth. And remember this, grief is not a betrayal of your strength, it's an expression of it. Because only the strong can look at devastation and refuse to turn their eyes away. Only the strong can say, yes, I lost something I loved, and I will not diminish that by pretending it didn't matter. Weakness is denial. Strength is grief carried with dignity. If you want to detach emotionally, you must grieve consciously. That's the paradox. Detachment doesn't come from shutting your heart down. It comes from letting it break open, fully, until it no longer clings to what is gone. And then, slowly, you'll notice the grief receding. One day you'll wake up and realize the wound is closed, not because you ignored it, but because you allowed it to bleed. So the challenge is this: stop numbing, stop running, stop hiding. Let yourself grieve the death of what was, because grief is the bridge from the world that's gone to the life that's waiting. And here's the truth you need to remember: you cannot heal what you refuse to feel. When a relationship ends, especially one that mattered deeply, the tendency is to define yourself by the absence. You say to yourself, "I'm the man she left," or "I'm the person who wasn't enough." And if you repeat that story long enough, it becomes your identity. That's one of the greatest dangers after loss. You collapse your sense of self into the wreckage of what used to be. But here's the problem with that: you are never only a partner in that relationship. You are first and foremost an individual, and if you lose sight of that, you lose the foundation of who you are. That's why detachment isn't only about letting go of her. It's about rebuilding your identity apart from her. Because whether you realize it or not, in the course of a relationship, you blend. You adopt routines, habits, even parts of her worldview. You become woven into a shared life. That's beautiful when the relationship thrives, but when it ends, you're left with empty spaces where those threads used to be. And if you don't actively reestablish yourself, you'll keep living as a shadow of the man you once were. Now, how do you rebuild? You do it through responsibility, through taking charge of your work, your health, your discipline, your purpose. You orient yourself toward goals that exist outside the emotional pull of the breakup. That might sound overly pragmatic, even cold, but it isn't. It's survival. Because if you don't build yourself back up in concrete ways, the grief consumes you. Structure keeps you afloat when the emotions threaten to drag you under. Think of it like training after an injury. If you shatter your leg, you don't just sit in the hospital bed forever thinking about how much it hurts. You start small. You rehabilitate. You strengthen what was weakened. You endure the discomfort of rebuilding because you know that's the only way to walk again. The same principle applies here. Your psyche is fractured. So you set tasks for yourself, meaningful tasks that restore your capacity to live without leaning on her presence. And there's another dimension to this. Every ounce of energy you invest in longing for her is energy stolen from your future. It's like pouring water into a bucket with a hole at the bottom. It drains endlessly and nothing grows. But if you redirect that energy into becoming competent, into cultivating your health, into pursuing excellence, you begin to generate momentum. And momentum creates dignity. You begin to respect yourself again, not because she validates you, but because you see yourself standing back up. This is why discipline matters so much. When you're lost in grief, your emotions tell you to collapse, to withdraw, to stop trying. Discipline is the counterweight. Discipline says, get up. Do the work anyway. And the beauty of discipline is that it doesn't depend on how you feel. It's an agreement with yourself that your future is worth more than your present despair. That simple act, keeping promises to yourself, begins to restore the identity that was shattered by her departure. Philosophically, what you're doing here is separating essence from circumstance. Your essence, the core of who you are, is not dependent on her approval or her presence. That's circumstance. If you confuse the two, you will always be at the mercy of others. But when you draw that distinction, when you say, "I am responsible for who I become, regardless of who stays or leaves," you reclaim sovereignty over your life. And sovereignty is the antidote to despair. Of course, this isn't easy. The temptation will be to fall back into self-pity, to scroll through old messages, to replay the memories until you're paralyzed. That's inertia. That's the gravitational pull of your former identity. To resist, it takes courage. But every time you resist, every time you choose to act constructively instead of collapsing, you carve out a new identity. Slowly, you become someone who is no longer defined by what you lost, but by what you are building. And here's the paradox. When you rebuild yourself without her, you don't diminish the relationship you had. You honor it, because what you're saying is, I will not let the end of this story destroy me. I will carry forward the strength I gained, the lessons I learned, the depth I discovered, and I will weave them into the man I am becoming. That way, the relationship, even in its absence, contributes to your growth rather than your destruction. So ask yourself, who are you without her? And if the answer terrifies you, then that's exactly the work you need to do. Because you are not a fragment of someone else's story. You are a whole story in yourself, and it's your responsibility to write it. This is what it means to rebuild your identity, to stop defining yourself by what slipped through your fingers and to start defining yourself by what you can grasp now in this moment with the tools you still possess. Because you do possess them. You have your will, your discipline, your potential. And that's enough to start again. So, don't waste yourself chasing ghosts. Don't surrender your future to a past that no longer exists. Rebuild, piece by piece, until you can stand and say, without hesitation, I am more than what I lost. When you've faced the reality of her absence, when you've allowed yourself to grieve, and when you've begun to rebuild your identity without her, there's still one more danger to confront. It's the danger of looking backward. And many men do this without even realizing it. They keep turning toward the past, replaying it like a loop they can't escape. They imagine if they could just go back to that one moment, say the right thing, make a different decision, the story would have turned out differently. And in that endless looking back, they waste the life that is still unfolding in front of them. The truth is that the past is gone. It doesn't matter how much you ache for it, how much you obsess over it, or how much you blame yourself for what happened. You cannot resurrect what has died. That's not just a relational truth. That's a metaphysical truth. Time moves in one direction, forward, and every attempt to resist it only breeds resentment. You can make yourself sick longing for something that no longer exists, and yet no amount of longing will bring it back. That's why emotional detachment isn't simply about letting go of a person. It's about reorienting yourself toward the future. Because if you don't aim at the future, you'll stay imprisoned in the past. And the past, once it's over, can only serve as memory, not as destiny. So, what does aiming at the future actually mean? It means creating a vision for yourself that is bigger than what you lost. It means asking, what kind of man do I want to become now? What kind of life do I want to build? What new strength, wisdom, and depth can I carry forward into what's next? That shift, from obsessing over what ended to investing in what's possible, is the very essence of transformation. And this is where responsibility comes in again, because the future doesn't just arrive. You don't drift into a meaningful life by accident. You build it, brick by brick, habit by habit, decision by decision. Every small act of courage in the present is a vote for the man you'll become in the future. Every refusal to wallow, every step toward growth, is a brick laid in the foundation of the new life you're creating. Philosophically, this is about orienting your soul toward meaning. Pain tempts you toward nihilism. You think, if love can fall apart like this, if something I valued so deeply can vanish, then what's the point of anything at all? That's the voice of despair, and it's powerful. But the antidote to despair is not comfort. The antidote is meaning. To aim yourself toward a goal so compelling, so worth striving for, that the pain becomes fuel rather than an anchor. That's how you reclaim your life. And here's the paradox again. When you stop clinging to the past, when you allow it to die, you create space for something greater. That doesn't mean another relationship right away. That may or may not come. It means growth. It means resilience. It means building a future that is not defined by the absence of someone else, but by the presence of your own strength. Now, aiming forward doesn't erase the scars. It doesn't mean you'll never feel the sting of memory. You will. But scars are not weaknesses. They're proof you survived. They're reminders that you walked through the fire and came out forged, not broken. And if you keep your eyes fixed on the future, those scars won't chain you. They'll guide you. One of the great errors people make is to believe that their best days are behind them, that the height of their joy and meaning was locked in a moment they can never recover. And that belief is poison. Because as long as you hold it, you will never truly live again. The truth is that the best days are always potentially ahead of you if you have the courage to shape them. Life is not static, it's dynamic. It can collapse, yes, but it can also rebuild in ways you never anticipated. And you won't see that unless you turn your gaze forward. So the task, then, is to discipline yourself to stop looking over your shoulder. Every time you find yourself trapped in memory, you bring yourself back to the present and ask, what can I do now that makes tomorrow stronger than yesterday? That's the path. Step after step, forward. Not perfect, not painless, but forward. And here's the final truth you need to wrestle with. Emotional detachment is not emptiness. It's not coldness. It's not the refusal to feel. It's the reorientation of your heart toward what's possible, not what's gone. It's the choice to invest your energy into the future you can still build, rather than the past you can never recover. So don't keep staring into the grave of what once was. Lift your eyes. Aim at a higher future. Let the pain teach you. Let the grief transform you. Let the rebuilding strengthen you. But then move forward. Because the future won't wait. And the life you're meant to live will not be found in the ashes of yesterday. I'll leave you with this. Stop trying to resurrect the dead past. It's gone. Instead, rise yourself and step into the future that's waiting for you.